Good afternoon to you. Mark Sutton with HurricaneTrack.com here with your off-season edition of the Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. So glad that you could tune in and check this out today. It is Monday, the 19th day of April, 2021. And as the graphic back there, well, here, let me show you again, shows us, we're going to talk about the Typhoon Surigae out in the western Pacific. Florida has been getting soaked lately, and that's going to continue for the next couple of days. Not related to anything coming out of the tropics per se, but yeah, they've had a lot of rain down there. And we will look at some clues that were released from Ben Knoll over the last few days regarding the upcoming hurricane season. We'll look at some lower 48 weather stuff, sea surface temperature anomalies, that kind of thing. You know how it is this time of year when we're waiting for hurricane season to start. We have to talk about something, so we try to make some things that are interesting available for you through this update. All right, so let's get on with it, and we will first take a look at this GFS snapshot. I found this over on storm2k.org, and people were talking about this way back on April the 9th. And look at that right there. It says this was initialized 12Z April the 9th. This was the GFS. This is the layer of the atmosphere, or the particular parameters of the GFS, showing the average precipitation rate, the mean sea level pressure, and the thicknesses. And look, it was showing way back then, for hour number 234, a very strong typhoon getting down to 888 millibars. Well, as it turns out, that 234-hour forecast was not too far off the mark. And we indeed had a very strong super typhoon. I think the lowest pressure reached, according to Joint Typhoon Warning Center, JTWC, easier just to say that, was 888, if I'm not mistaken. Anyhow, even if it wasn't, this was a very strong super typhoon. Fortunately, it stayed far enough east of the Philippines to spare them any major impacts. And it didn't come out exactly the way the GFS depicted 234 hours out, but that's a pretty good forecast. And remember, this is the new and improved GFS. This is the latest version of it. What are we up at, 16 or 17 now? And so it's done pretty well. That's a pretty good. In fact, I remember a few people kind of scoffing at it, that the GFS was once again, not breaking precedents in showing these crazy low pressure super typhoons, way out in the long time ranges, whatever. And lo and behold, this particular time it came to pass. Is this a sign that the GFS is going to work miracles for us and give us a lot of lead time? Well, we'll have to see. It's just one case where it did pretty good, and the Euro didn't show butkus up into that point. It's at its 10-day time frame. GFS did pretty good. All right, so GFS, praise and applause over and notwithstanding, let's take a look at the typhoon today. It's kind of got that old truck tire look. East of the Philippines is not moving very much. Roughly Category 4 equivalent on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Here's a nice zoomed in animation of it, courtesy of the weathernerds.org website. And, it's just kind of hanging out there east of the Philippines. Here's Catanduanes Island down here. I think this is the Lagonoy Gulf. I hope I know my geography down there. I'm pretty sure about that. From Brent's exploits down there in 2019, I had to learn a little bit about the Bicol region. But, there are some outer bands, certainly some rain showers, maybe some squally weather from time to time, especially out at Catanduanes Island. But otherwise, yes, they were spared, the good folks of the Philippines, from this wrath, as this didn't get close enough to them. It just wasn't in the pattern, thank goodness. So this will move on out eventually and weaken as it gets into a colder air mass. Overall environmental conditions will eventually make this wane away, and it might inject some energy into the westerlies, as we say. Going back to the GFS snapshot here, sometimes these systems, when they curve into the westerlies, can put a lot of energy up into the northern latitudes and affect things downstream later on. I haven't seen a lot of talk about that, because it's kind of stuck right now. It didn't recurve around quickly and get into the pattern while it's still extremely intense. Just something to watch for, but sometimes that happens, but apparently not this time. All right, moving on along to some of the typical things that we talk about in the weekly update these days and these months of the off season. The Southern Oscillation Index has taken a bit of a dive in recent weeks because we are transitioning more towards a neutral ENSO state. El Nino Southern Oscillation is what that means. So the 30-day average is roughly just a hair above zero. And the 90-day average is still fairly respectable at 4.3. Typically, we see or would look for numbers around +7 or higher to really keep us into that La Nina base state. That's what the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia talks about. If you ever read through some of their stuff about seasonal forecasting and how the SOI impacts the weather down there, the state of the ENSO, it's very important to agricultural, wildfire concerns, rainfall concerns, that kind of thing. In Australia, the land down under there, and they have been tracking this stuff a long time, so they really know what they're talking about. And we can see this graphically represented as well. A little bit of a dip here, but the 30-day has started to come up just ever so slightly, just a little bit of an increase. Basically, we're getting towards this neutral pattern, and what we're going to want to look for is to see, does that eventually spill more into warm ENSO or El Nino territory? Probably not, but more of a warming pattern in the Pacific than a cooling pattern. Although some of the modeling in the last couple of weeks has, depending on which ones you look at, suggested a return to La Nina conditions. Some are suggesting a warm ENSO event. We're in that period of time now, about the next month or so, maybe the next 3 weeks. We're still in this window that we call the spring predictability barrier. And it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. That this time of year, there's a lot of things going on around the globe. The way the weather patterns are changing. The Earth is in a period of change as we go in transition out of the northern hemisphere winter into spring and eventually into summer. All kinds of things start to happen. And sometimes the models just can't figure out where are things going to go. What's going to be the tipping point? And in this particular year, it's not real easy. But that being said, sometimes you just open up the window. I like to say this a lot. Look outside and see what's going on. And so let's do that. This is the April 18th. Remember, this is always a day behind. Anomalies map, and most of the Pacific is cooler than average along the equatorial region. It's still there. It's not overwhelmingly so into deep La Nina territory, but you can see as plain as I can that it's colder. These blues represent colder anomalies. Anomalies are departures from the average or the normal, whatever you prefer. And then you got sort of a colder northeastern Pacific look, except a little bit of warming here just off the coast of Mexico. But then jump over to the Atlantic Basin, and this area in the northeast Atlantic, in the subtropics, quite a bit warmer than the long-term average. The main development region definitely looking warmer than the long-term average. Not many cold splotches in there. Kind of average in the Caribbean. Everything's just average and looking good. The Gulf, warmer than it should be overall. The northwest Atlantic is kind of a hit and miss with these different islands of substantial cold anomalies butting right up against very warm anomalies. I don't know how to explain that. That's an interesting phenomenon. But otherwise, the overall look to the North Atlantic here is positive. Sea surface temperature anomalies, and generally the Pacific is negative. And let's see what this looks like in a month. We'll revisit this every week, but yeah, so far, no major changes seen that would shape the upcoming hurricane season to be anything less than at least average, if not above average. We shall see. All right, actual sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico, 26 Celsius or roughly 80 Fahrenheit or higher. Anything south of this black line that I am running around everything to make it easy for you. So a good deal of the Gulf now has warmed up. This is 27 Celsius. There's 28, even a little 29 Celsius right off the coast of Mexico down there on the northwest side of the Yucatan. Wouldn't that be nice? 29 Celsius water. But look down here, even in parts of the Keys, water temperatures are 80, 81 degrees. Just a few areas here in and around Fort Myers, the Port Charlotte area, also getting close to 80 degrees. And this will continue to rapidly warm the overall look to the Gulf of Mexico, as we would expect it would do this time of year. If it doesn't, we're really in trouble. Something's wrong. And going back to the anomalies map, it's, warmer than it should be across the Gulf. But as I have talked about before, if you've seen my videos enough times, you know that the Gulf's always going to be warm. It is always going to support intense hurricanes come the peak time of the season. Once we get to May and June, if it's warmer than it should be, yes, that could lead to some early season mischief, and it can help contribute to severe weather because you have more energy and more moisture down here that gets transported north into the southern plains, the southern part of the U.S., so forth and so on. When you get the strong Bermuda high out here, if I can talk, you get the return flow around it, and that pumps in that warm, moist air. And you can also get these frontal systems that drape across Florida like what we've got now. I'll show you that in a minute. And that can cause some problems with heavy rain. We'll examine that shortly. There's the Gulf again. Here is the East Coast Mid-Atlantic states. Just a little hint right there of 26 Celsius starting to creep up into the Gulf Stream. Water temperatures gradually warming up. I told my kids it'll be about another 3 weeks or so before we can head down to Wrightsville Beach and consider jumping in. I'd like air temperatures in the mid-80s before jumping into water that's in the mid-60s. All right? At least the outside temperature in the air, the ambient air temperature, is warm enough to offset that chilly, chilly ocean water down there. It's coming, though. The warm weather and the warm water is a-coming. All right, so yeah, looking at lower 48 weather just a little bit, kind of a segue here. But first of all, real quick, the intertropical convergence zone starting to show up a little bit here in the Pacific, where the trades from the northern hemisphere meet the trades from the southern hemisphere, and you get some rising motion. Nothing closing off and organizing just yet, but we're about a month away, actually less than a month away, until the East Pacific season officially begins. So we'll have to watch these little disturbances. Otherwise, in the Atlantic and the Caribbean, trade winds are blowing pretty briskly through the Caribbean, maybe a little stronger than average through here, and that's why the sea surface temperatures have kind of gone back to being average. Maybe we'll see some below average SST anomalies through here when we look at this next week. We'll have to wait and see. But here's that front, the stalled frontal system. Trough came down, lifted out, left the front behind. And in the summertime and the fall, that can focus and lead to tropical cyclone development. Right now, there is too much, however you say it, in the way of upper level winds. But there is some convergence down here where the air is able to come together and rise. And it's been wet down there. Going to be wet for the next few days, so you guys pay attention to that. Be careful if you're traveling around that area. If you're in Central Florida, it's been nasty the last few days. You're getting some rainfall, which is needed, but it's coming at a price because it's been creating some flooding and other severe weather. All right, real quick, I teased this earlier with hurricane season clues. Ben Knoll tweeting over the last few days the Euro UK Met Super Blend. Kind of an interesting look to it. Fairly dry overall in a corridor aimed towards the Greater Antilles and Florida, but the deep tropics wetter than average, which is hard to explain, and it's also hard to explain the positive anomalies that would show up in this green here for the southeast, unless we were getting short fuse systems that form and then make landfall and dump all their rain. This isn't from frontal boundaries. This is from more than likely tropical activity. And there's just a little bit of green out here. Wetter. See? Ben made it easy. Green is wetter. That brownish red color, whatever you want to call it, is drier. Easy to understand this thematic map. So I'll outline it in yellow real quick. This is the wetter areas, the signal of the monsoon. That's good. They need the rain out there, and it's kind of neat to see that. I'm hoping to go out there this year. But this is curious right here. All this positive anomaly, or wetter than average, according to the UK Met and ECMWF Super Blend, as Ben calls it. But this is just weird how there's a dry slot through here. We'll see. We'll see what they say, these models, once we get to May. Remember, this is still predicated on these various climate models understanding the state of the ENSO. And I think the UK Met and the ECMWF are both forecasting a rather warm ENSO event relative to where we are now. Let's see if they have that same tune, so to speak, if they're singing the same song a month from now. These get updated about mid-month, so we'll see what Ben and his Super Blend have to say in a few weeks. All right, so lower 48 weather. Look at the blue on there. I was like, what? Really? Lots of freeze and frost warnings here. This late season cold stuff has to just go away. I'm tired of it. I'm ready for the 80s and 90s. I like the warm weather. Even some winter weather advisories and some winter storm warnings for parts of the Rockies, and then out in parts of Utah and western Colorado, the red flag warning, meaning quite a bit of windy, dry conditions. But at least we're not seeing any major severe weather outbreaks. This, again, from pivotalweather.com. We can click over here and look at the convective outlook panels. And this is kind of cool. I like how they do this. What's not cool is when it's on you, when something's nasty. Marginal conditions today, tomorrow, and maybe some general thunderstorms even beyond that time frame. This today, tomorrow, this would be Wednesday, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Come on, Mark. And then it kind of calms down, hopefully by day 4. But then, hello, look at that. Day 5, severe weather in the traditional tornado alley, a possibility. So we'll have to watch that. And, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting closer to when my team and I are hoping to head out there and do this huge test of all of our equipment, many cameras running, not chasing tornadoes. And we'll talk about this more. I'll have a special video just about this project. But think of it as a dress rehearsal for hurricane season, using a potential multi-day outbreak as the backdrop for said dress rehearsal. We want to do that. Put up cameras all across a moderate risk area or something like that, or enhanced risk. Rather it not be a high risk, just too many chasers out there and it makes life difficult, believe me. But that's coming. I think that's coming. The pattern's going to change. And we can even see that represented here from John Castle. I finally asked him, how do you say your last name? Was it Cassell? Whatever. And he said it's John Castle, just like a castle. And he was tweeting this today. Some analog guidance going out into time. And this is one of the SIPs using the GFS. And just the overall look to things. More thunderstorm activity, what we call convective problems, one way to look at it, heading out into time, and then eventually going way on out, several days out now. It looks like the upper Midwest and the traditional tornado alley areas would become more favorable. And when is this? This is 2021, around the 27th or so. So it's more than a week out. But that's what's so cool about these analogs, is they can kind of look at things, these computer models, and the people that know how to interpret them, and give us an advanced look into the future, just like we do for hurricanes, and when the Madden-Julian oscillation might be favorable, or a convectively coupled Kelvin wave. Hurricanes just don't pop up out of nowhere. There's a pre-existing set of conditions, and then even behind all of that, there are larger pre-existing favorable conditions that give us hurricanes, and the same is true for severe weather, and the modeling can generally see that out into the future. So we'll be watching that closely as we get into May especially. All right, so don't forget, we are supported through Patreon, and we connect that with our HurricaneTrack Insider website. And that grants you access as a supporter, as a crowdfunding partner. The $10 level, that's where it all starts. We have access to all the cameras that we do, an incredible digital dashboard, anything that we're putting out there that is involving the field work, you have 100% access to that. starting at $10 a month. At the $25 level, I will send you immediately, because they're going to be here Wednesday, our 2021 paper hurricane tracking chart. I'm going to also make a few of them available over, through PayPal like I did last year. They were pretty popular, but if you're at the $25 level already on Patreon, I'll send you one included. You don't have to pay extra. And new for this year, and a few people have joined lately thinking and saying that, oh, wow, I like that. Zoom. Yes, I am doing weekly Zoom meetings with our patrons to talk about things. And we did it on Friday. It had a couple of hiccups because my home internet went into the toilet. We had about 19 people on there at one point, which was really cool to really interact and talk with each other. And during hurricane season, that is going to be a very valuable tool that we can get together and discuss what's coming, how to get people best prepared. We do it all. All of our funding now comes through Patreon. I would say 99% of it at this point. In this wonderful crowdfunding world that we live in, that's how you become part of it. Patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. The link is in the description of today's video. Speaking of today's video, don't forget, you're watching on YouTube. Become a subscriber to the YouTube channel. That still doesn't cost anything, which is a good thing. YouTube's made it free for all these years. They too have their own membership stuff that they have implemented, but we do all our stuff through Patreon. But yep, we're on YouTube, Twitter @HurricaneTrack, and on Facebook. That's about all I can handle. I am going to start a new podcast, however. I'll talk about that maybe next week. On May 1st will be the first test of it, and I'll just wait until next week to tell you about it. It's a new podcast available to all over all the various podcast resources that are out there. I'll be using Anchor to produce it, and you'll see. We'll talk about it next week. Anyway, we're on the social media, so follow us, like us, share, get the word out about what we're doing, and if you're in the position to get involved and help out, we'd love to have you. We do some great things, and we could use your support to make it happen. All right, I'm done for today. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com. Good to chat with you. We'll do it again next week.